So you're probably wondering why I am walking around this neighborhood in the dead of night like this. Well, that's for a couple of reasons. The first of which being that I actually filmed a couple of videos earlier today, but for whatever reason, the audio didn't record. So I am back out here at nighttime with this blinding light in my face. I literally cannot see, filming this video for you. But also because this is a very safe neighborhood. This is, by all accounts, a very safe neighborhood. It's not the most affluent neighborhood. You probably can't see literally anything that I'm showing you. But the point is, I wouldn't be walking around this neighborhood with a $500 camera like this, drawing all of this attention to myself, if I didn't feel like it was a safe place to be. Even by American standards. But for as safe and nice as this neighborhood is, this is actually not a very affluent area by American standards, and in particular by Dallas standards. You might be wondering, well, Jordan, if this neighborhood that you've been showing in the background of your videos is not affluent, then what does an affluent neighborhood in the DFW area actually look like? And the answer is simple. The way you know that you are in an affluent neighborhood in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and in much of the US, to be honest, is when there is a gate surrounding the neighborhood. So again, I'm just walking around this neighborhood right now, and I hope that the angle is okay because this light is so bright that I literally cannot look into it. But I'm walking around this neighborhood right now. In a gated community, I probably wouldn't be able to get away with this, especially at night. And that is for a reason. It's because these gated communities tend to be very insulated and isolated, and they do not want outsiders in their space. Hence why there is a gate and why people choose to live in those kinds of communities. That said, I find it very fascinating because in the entirety of my time in Europe, 14 months and 2 weeks if you count the trip that I took to Valencia in 2023. I also saw Zurich for a day during that time. I don't think I saw a single gated neighborhood in Europe. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't any gated neighborhoods in Europe. I'm just saying I personally never saw any of them. I lived in the Netherlands for 14 months. During that time, I also visited Antwerp for a day. I visited London for a day. And again, I've already been to Valencia and Zurich. Never seen a gated community. And by the way, just as a quick little side note, if this backfires on me, if somebody tries to take this camera from me or whatever, you are going to see Olympic level speed from yours truly in this video. This video will go viral for a whole different reason, but I digress. Again, in a neighborhood like this, I don't really have a whole lot to worry about, but it kind of makes me wonder, why is it that people with money feel compelled to move into gated communities? I never really posed this question to myself before going to Europe, because here in the US, it's almost kind of a given that if you make it, if you're making a lot of money and you want to show that you're affluent and give your family a better, safe life, so to speak, you move to a gated community. It's just what you do. It's a status symbol and a safety tactic wrapped into one. And here in the US, both of those factors are very important in people's decision-making processes. I'm hearing very weird sounds and stuff behind me. I don't know what's going on. Again, I am wholeheartedly prepared to showcase my Olympic level 200 meter, 100 meter speed. But in all seriousness, people tend to move to these gated communities when they make a lot of money, but I don't really understand the point of that. Growing up, I always thought it was something to aspire to. I thought that it was a goal that I should have for myself, but I never stopped to question it. But when I went to Europe, I realized the people who have money out there don't really live like that, because there's no need to. You see, in Europe, and this is true both anecdotally and statistically, people just don't have to worry about crime as much. There's not nearly as much crime on a day-to-day basis. So generally, there's no real need, there's no incentive for people to spend the extra money to surround themselves with a gate, which, if you think about it, is kind of like prison. People are paying $800,000 plus to go to prison. Maybe a very posh prison, but prison nonetheless. I just don't understand it. I don't understand why people spend that kind of money, work their whole lives, just to be able to move to a place where they're completely isolated from the rest of the world. The only reason, the only logical explanation I could think of for something like this is they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe within the area that they inhabit. But if you really stop and think about it for literally just a few seconds, if you don't feel safe enough to live in a neighborhood without a gate in the area that you're moving to, you probably shouldn't be moving there. I mean, if you really think about it, it's kind of like people who feel compelled to get guns for self-defense. And look, in Texas, people like this come a dime a dozen. If you want to have a gun for recreational purposes or whatever, then hey, power to you. But I don't really understand why people feel the need to get guns for self-defense, because if you feel like you need a gun, maybe you should just move. Maybe you should just go somewhere else where you don't need a gun. I don't know. To me, this just makes so much sense after being in Europe that you shouldn't need to take these kinds of measures, especially if you're a person with a whole lot of resources, a lot of money. You should be able to invest in your safety in a different way. It kind of reminds me of what I've seen, and I haven't actually been to these places, but I've seen a lot of videos of South Africa. And by the way, South Africa is one of the most beautiful countries I've seen, at least on the internet, and it's very high on my list of places to visit, especially Cape Town. But something I've seen in Cape Town and Johannesburg specifically is in the affluent areas of these cities, a lot of times you'll have these nice houses, but then you'll have literal electric fences surrounding them. Electric fences, and you'll have armed security. And the fences will have spikes on the top, and then they'll have guard dogs on top of that. And somehow people still get robbed and kidnapped and things like that. And when I see stuff like that, it blows my mind. Because it's like, if you have that much money, why be in that area? I just don't get it. I cannot for the life of me wrap my head around it. If you're one of those people who lives in a gated community and you're not an A-list celebrity who can justify living that kind of lifestyle because you're trying to avoid stalkers or whatever else, then please enlighten me in the comments. But I just cannot wrap my head around it. Now, the next thing that I see pretty frequently here in the US that I never really saw in Europe, and again, I'm not saying that this doesn't happen or exist in Europe, I'm just saying I've never seen it, is teenagers dying. Now, again, this happens everywhere. Sometimes people are born with heart defects, people get cancer, people have complications with other diseases, pre-existing conditions. I get that. I totally get that. But that's not what I'm talking about. When I say teenagers dying, I'm referring to teenagers dying of unnatural causes. Two unnatural causes in particular, the first of which being gun violence or knife violence, but especially gun violence. This is something that I never really encountered. Obviously, I didn't really encounter this personally here in the US because I grew up in a very nice area. But even within this area that I grew up in 2023 actually, and you can verify this for yourself, you can Google these stories and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. In 2023, there were two 17-year-olds who both lost their lives to murder, to gun violence. One of them lost their life at a park, this park called Central Park here in Lewisville, Texas, that I went to relatively frequently as a kid. It's a very safe park, the kind of place where you take your kids. The kind of place where you can probably film a video like this at night with a camera like this and not really have a whole lot of worries. And the other one lost his life literally a few meters away from my school campus, the campus of the high school that I graduated from, Louisville High School. You can just look up Louisville High School murder. You'll probably see the story. It'll probably be the first thing that pops up. But these were two 17-year-olds in separate cases, though truthfully, when I think about it, they were probably related somehow, some way. But I don't know. I'm not going to speak too much on that because I don't know all of the details. But they both lost their lives to gun violence. And the one that happened near my school campus was particularly jarring to read about because it happened in broad daylight. Broad daylight. Okay, I'm talking about right after school ended. The kid was going to the Raising Cane's, is a restaurant right next to the school campus. Look this up on Google Maps. Go to Street View. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Right next to the school campus, somebody pulled up, got out of their car, shot him and killed him. Broad daylight, probably dozens, if not hundreds of witnesses. And to make matters worse, the killers in both of these situations were minors themselves. Both of the killers were minors, 17 or under. And again, I'm not saying these sorts of things don't happen in Europe. I'm sure that there are areas of certain countries where these things do happen. But statistically, I don't know that there's a country in Europe that isn't going through a war of some sort that deals with this kind of violence amongst that age demographic, especially gun violence. And again, it's not just guns, it's knives as well. Recently, this was probably a few weeks ago from the time of me filming this. It was right after I got back to the US with my girlfriend. There was a stabbing at a track meet. These two 17-year-olds, I don't know what it is about that 17-year-old age, but these two 17-year-olds got into it about some sort of seating arrangement. One of them was sitting in the wrong area. The other one told him to move. He wouldn't move. And it got physical. One of them was stabbed and killed in the altercation. And now the other one, he's facing life in prison, potentially. And look, teenage boys are teenage boys. And this happens to women as well, but mostly boys, I've noticed. Teenage boys are teenage boys. They're gonna get into stuff because testosterone, insecurity, all of that. But to take it to that level, where you're taking someone else's life and throwing yours away in the process, that's just something that I didn't really come across in Europe. And again, the statistics, they're gonna back this up. And look, this is in a safe area. The first two murders, they happened in Louisville, Texas, a very safe city. The last one, and again, this isn't necessarily classified as a murder as of this point, but somebody did get killed, a killing. This one happened in a city called Frisco. Frisco is the kind of place where you find primarily gated communities. Gated communities, the kind of place where I would make a video like this walking around in the dark and I wouldn't even be looking around, wouldn't be looking over my shoulder because I know nothing's gonna happen. It's crazy. Even in the safe areas, these sorts of things happen. And I'd imagine that if something like this happened in the Netherlands, this would probably make national news. But hey, America, right? Anyways, the other way that teenagers are dying young is in vehicular accidents. And that brings me to the next thing that I see here in the US that I never really saw in Europe, and that is student parking. So something that really blew my mind, and you can actually witness the moment that I experienced this reverse culture shock in the video where I showcase what it's like cycling here in the US. But you can see the moment where I saw a student parking lot and it literally blew my mind. I stopped my bike and pointed it out because my mind was blown. In the Netherlands, if you're young enough to be in high school, you're too young to drive. So it's pretty much impossible to drive yourself to school as a student in the Netherlands. Hence why, instead of having these big, massive student parking lots, some cases you can even paint your own spot. You can rent out your spot, paint it to your liking, etc. That's a whole thing at some of these high schools. But instead of that, you have probably 20 bike racks, big bike racks, and they are absolutely packed with bikes during the day. That's something that I never really encountered. I never saw a bike rack that big until I saw a Dutch school for the first time. And I was like, oh, pretty much everyone here cycles or walks to school, especially the high schoolers, or they take their scooters, their mopeds, whatever you want to call them. That was a major culture shock for me. And again, the reverse was also true. Coming back to the US and seeing that all of those bikes suddenly turn into cars was mind-blowing as well, because while we do have bike racks at our American high schools, you might have enough space for 10 to 15 bikes, maybe 20 if they're being generous. And there are always going to be empty spaces there. I don't know anybody who rode their bike to high school when I went. Pretty much everyone that I knew either drove, carpooled, or took the school bus, which is another thing that I never saw in Europe. Actually, I didn't even know that this was a uniquely American thing until my girlfriend pointed it out the first time that she came to the US back in 2023. We were driving down the road and we saw a school bus. To me, it's just a Tuesday, but she was like, wait, school buses are real? That's an actual thing? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I didn't really think much of it, but up to that point, she had never seen a school bus because they don't have the yellow school buses in Europe. And I find that really fascinating because that was an integral part of my childhood. I vividly remember riding the school bus in elementary school to my apartment, or from the apartment to the school, waiting in line, hoping that I got on the right bus, and you had to remember your bus number, all of that. Or in high school, we had multiple campuses at my high school, so I would ride the bus from one campus to another between classes, and it was just normal. That is not a thing in the Netherlands, and I imagine it's also not a thing in much of the rest of Europe.